Farms Conference. I'm Dean Boss, Sustainable Agriculture Educator for Michigan State University Extension and a member of the conference planning team. On behalf of the conference planning team, we're very excited to welcome you back. We would like to start today by offering a land acknowledgement. We collectively acknowledge that we gather on the lands of the Anishinaabe, the Council of the Three Fires, Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. We recognize, support, and advocate for the sovereignty of Indigenous nations of the Great Lakes, for Indigenous individuals and communities who live here now, and for those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. We further recognize the ongoing relationship of dependence upon and respect for all living beings of earth, sky, and water. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and experiences. We will work to hold ourselves more accountable to the needs of American Indian, Native, and Indigenous peoples. Thank you. I'm pleased to welcome you to the Michigan Family Farms Conference session sponsored by the North Central Region Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program, known as SARE. As the Michigan State Coordinator for SARE, I would like to tell you a little about SARE. SARE is a nationwide grants and education program to advance sustainable innovation to American agriculture. North Central Region SARE offers competitive grants and educational opportunities for producers, scientists, educators, institutions, organizations, and others exploring sustainable agriculture in America's Midwest. The North Central Region SARE Farmers Forum, featured here, is a traveling annual event giving farmers, ranchers, researchers, and others the chance to share information about sustainable agricultural practices with a national audience. These presentations focus on research, demonstration, and education projects that promote profitable practices that are good for the environment and community. The projects highlighted in these presentations and the Farmers Forum are funded by grants from North Central Region SARE, a USDA funded program that supports and promotes sustainable farming and ranching by offering competitive grants and educational opportunities. For more information about North Central Region SARE, you can go to their website at www.northcentralsare.org. You can email them at ncrsare@umn.edu, or you can call them at 612-626-3113. In addition to SARE's sponsorship of the conference, other sponsors include Michigan Public Health Institute, Greenstone Farm Credit Services, Michigan State University College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, MSU Center for Regenerative Agriculture, Michigan Farmers Market Association, Michigan Organic Food and Farm Alliance, and Taste the Local Difference. You can learn more about our sponsors in the sponsor and vendor catalog at the bottom of this webpage. The agenda for this session begins with a short video from SARE entitled, "What is Sustainable Agriculture?" Following that, there will be 3 presentations about projects that are funded by SARE. First, Abby Johnson, who along with her husband Nick owns Ox Heights Farm, will present her project Intercropping Chestnuts and Livestock Forage in northern Michigan. The second presentation will be from Ben Terrell, Crop and Soil Science Master's student at MSU, and his project is Manure Composition and Digital Agriculture. The last presentation will be from Katie Brandt, the Education Program Manager for the MSU Student Organic Farm, and that presentation is a map to your farm success, finding loans, land, opportunities, and experts. If you'd like to learn more about our presenters, click on bios and information in the program schedule. Following the presentations, there will be an opportunity for you to get your questions answered by the presenters. As you watch the presentations, please enter your questions in the comment box below the video, and we will answer them during this part of the session. We ask you to help out our presenters today by filling out the session evaluation, which can be accessed by clicking the gray session evaluation box to the right of the comment box under this video. This session is also available in Spanish. You can select that option by clicking on the yellow rectangle on the right above the video. So let's go ahead and get started.
How do you make a farm or ranch more sustainable? There's no single answer, but there are common practices used by producers across the country to improve profitability, quality of life, and environmental stewardship. In this episode, let's look at what it means to be sustainable and how this looks across an entire farm or ranch. Farmers and ranchers who prioritize sustainability aim to produce enough food, fuel, and fiber to meet today's needs without compromising our ability to do so tomorrow. While we use different practices that work best on our unique farms and ranches, we all share this same vision. We also view our farm or ranch as a holistic system, and we look for ways to improve our farm's overall health and resilience. So, practices that are considered sustainable should meet 4 criteria. They're productive, they're profitable, they enhance the quality and abundance of our natural resources, and they improve quality of life for our families and communities. We find ways to work with nature when raising crops and livestock by focusing on things like biodiversity, soil health, ecological pest management, and water conservation. We use practices like crop rotation, cover crops, rotational grazing, and locally adapted breeds and resistant varieties. We lower our use of tillage and chemical inputs as much as possible. Sustainable practices are also profitable, usually because they improve our efficiency with resources. We're creating a productive growing environment that uses fewer purchased inputs. We strive to be good marketers, and we seek out value-added strategies to increase profits. We sell our products through multiple channels and engage with communities to meet the demand for local foods and better ensure that all people can access healthy food. We need to consider the people who are growing our food too. Sustainability involves focusing on the health and well-being of ourselves, our families, and our workers. And we look to the future by actively encouraging the next generation of farmers. Farmers who prioritize sustainability are always trying to find new ways to solve problems and build resilient systems. That's why many of us collaborate with our peers and extension professionals to conduct on-farm research. There's much more to learn about sustainable agriculture. Start exploring today.
Hi, I'm Abby Johnson, and I am going to be talking about our project in northern Michigan with intercropping chestnuts and livestock forage. I want to have big thanks to Presque Farms, who worked with us on the forage sides of things, and also for our support from the USDA and Michigan State University Extension. My husband, Nick, has also been very influential in the project and a resource on all sides. So
great.
We dug lots of holes.
Take it away, Abby. Looking forward to it.
Thanks. So to kind of give an overview as far as what I'm going to talk about is in this project, we looked at agroforestry as a means to diversify our production on the farm, as a way to increase our climate resilience, restore some productivity to some of the marginal farmlands in our area, and look at those synergies that might exist between a specialty crop and a traditional production system. Can we find ways to use our traditional cropping to bridge that transition to ease that financial burden as you go into a specialty crop. Because specialty crops are expensive. Anybody who's looked at planting things like cherries, grapes, hops, those crops are not, as far as their establishment cost, it's expensive, and it's also expensive as far as opportunity costs. When you look at, you're not going to get production off of those acreages in year 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4, 5, 6. So you've got to have a way to continue to generate income off of that land while you're waiting for your trees to grow. So kind of just a basic rundown on what we're going to talk about. First, I'm going to introduce you to our farm and its location. Talk about why we chose chestnuts. What was it about chestnuts that made us want to grow them? Then looking at the establishment, what the establishment process was, and then what we did for intercropping. We did forage, and so what went into that process. And then talking about the future, what we can do or what we are doing on our farm, and kind of where we see the future of our farm going. So we purchased our initial acreage in 2010, and then have continued to add to that over the years slowly as it goes. We are first generation farmers in our area, and we have 5 children. So lots of little hands to help, and also kind of lots of potential for our legacy. So on our acreage, we have about 120 acres that are forested, and we do actively manage those forests for timber production. And then we also have the 50 acres, about 50 acres that are tillable, or that have been tilled over the years, have grown more of those traditional row crops. On our farm, we also have sheep and goats, and we've had teams of oxen. Oxen is kind of a pastime of mine that I really enjoy, and that's where we get our farm name, Ox Heights. So we've dabbled in a few different tree crops over the years, some apples, peaches, hazelnuts, obviously some timber production, and so those all pretty on a small scale, nothing to the level that we have now gone into chestnuts. We also have done some Christmas tree greenery, where we're going and we're harvesting boughs that then are made into Christmas wreaths and grave blankets and other holiday decorations. Definitely on the wholesale side of that. We haven't made any of the retail products. So here we are. We're located in the northeast portion of the Lower Peninsula, about 5-6 miles as the crow flies to Lake Huron, and again about that same distance to Rogers City, Michigan. We sit on a region that is referred to as Moltke Ridge. So as the name might imply, we sit rather high up, and the area basically overlooks the lake. And as a result, we find that we have a particular microclimate. When you look at the USDA zone maps, as you might have done when you're researching what you can plant in your area, if you zoom into our little area there, you can see that those little green dots, and that's 6A, zone 6A, which is comparable to Traverse City. And we think of Traverse City and all the specialty crops they grow in that region, apples and cherries and hops and grapes. And so that was intriguing to us, that potentially we sit in a microclimate where we also could grow specialty crops. And so in the wintertime, we don't really get much below -10, -5, as the zone would indicate. Additionally, we have our soils are really deep and well drained. We don't see standing water. We don't have the clays. And as such, it really does support trees very well. Many farmers in our region have really nice woodlots that they manage for high production timber and grow some really beautiful high quality trees. So again, that was a factor that went into our thinking about what we can grow on our land. Historically, this is some pictures of our farm, and historically, I would classify it as marginal. Our tillable acreage is marginal for traditional row crops. The inputs necessary to grow crops in our region is high for what we get out of it. They don't do well necessarily with we tend to have a shorter growing season. It's later in the spring before we warm up, and then we cool down faster in the fall. So, and it's the profitability side for a traditional row crop is not necessarily there. So this is what we were looking at, and here is some transformations of our field. So this is, we see, this is some soybeans in 2016 that were on our field, and we transformed this into chestnuts. And here we can see in 2021 the difference. Just the growth that we've achieved on this land is pretty significant. The transformation is stark. So what went into us selecting chestnuts? Again, I mentioned that our microclimate, our climate was similar to that of Traverse City. So we started going down the list of those crops that they grow there. And that we talked about cherries and we talked about apples, and we wanted to go the specialty crop route. And we came to chestnuts, and the more we talked about chestnuts, the more we like chestnuts, the more that they seemed like something that we could grow that would be highly profitable. Looking at when we talk to other growers, in the $2,000 to $4,000 per acre per year. Chestnuts are in high demand. Currently, the United States imports thousands of pounds of chestnuts every year to meet that demand. And currently in Michigan, there's already a co-op set up. And so that cooperative really works with growers to market the chestnuts, and they sell out every year. And they really have expressed that they continue to need more chestnuts. Like they have demand that they cannot fill. So that was really appealing to us to think about that market as being open, a lot of potential there. Michigan State University also has a good support system put in place. There's been research and currently research done on chestnuts, looking at the pest issues, outlining establishment, really, and people there that are excited about chestnuts and offering a lot of support. Again, we looked at our climate. Our climate seemed suitable for chestnuts. And I was also very appealing to think about planting a crop and it being there for 100, 200 years. Could be there for many generations. What was our challenges? Our challenges it's the high establishment costs. It's not a cheap crop to plant. You're talking about anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 to put it in. Once you've paid for your trees and you've put your irrigation systems into place, and it's not inexpensive, as most specialty crops are not. There's definitely a lot of uncertainty about our growth and survival. We are the farthest north and east of any chestnut orchard in Michigan. So are they going to grow? Are they going to survive? If they survive, how well do they grow? If they grow, how are they going to produce crops that are viable? Are they going to consistently produce crops? There's still some unknowns for us. We still don't have answers to some of those questions, but that was one of our challenges when we were thinking about it and talking about it. And then also, how do we maintain our farm revenue during establishment? So it's 10 years before you are at what they would consider full production or more. So you're definitely in that marginal range where you're not really getting much revenue off and you're having to put money in. So how can we balance that with maybe some other more traditional croppings in between our chestnuts? So we met that kind of looking at those challenges with our SARE proposal and our SARE project, where we're looking at establishing an orchard following MSU's best practices, and then comparing those growth and survival between cultivars, and then also demonstrating what forages can we harvest between those trees, and documenting it and being able to share that information with other people and share our experiences. And hopefully others can learn also what we learned, because we did learn a lot. So what did we do? We chose to plant European, Japanese, hybrid, grafted chestnut trees. The varieties, the cultivars we planted were Colossals, Bush de Banizak, Marigoule, Marsol, Precocious Migules, and Labor Days. So if you're not familiar with what a grafted tree is, basically you have a seedling rootstock, a rootstock. In this case, with chestnuts, they go from a seedling. So you take a seed or nut and plant that and you let it grow. And then they put on a cutting of the scion wood from a known cultivar, a known variety, onto that seedling, and then it grows. And what that does is it allows you to have a tree with some known characteristics. So we planted about 432 trees in 2017 and an additional 126 trees in the fall of 2018. Kind of making those decisions, kind of thinking about what kind of trees we're planting. Again, we decided to go with the grafted tree. That grafted tree has been selected. It's a known characteristics. When you plant it, you know what kind of nuts you're going to receive. You know what kind of nuts, like timeline, when they're going to be ready to harvest, when they're going to drop, genetically identical to each other of the same cultivar. And so we have those kind of reliable characteristics. They also bear earlier. We received trace quantities of nuts in the first couple of years. So there's definitely some nuts out there soon. With a seedling tree, you're going to have a tree that's growing from a nut. Obviously, each of those nuts are going to be genetically different from one another. So you are going to have variation between those trees. You also have unknowns with regards to when that tree is actually going to come into production. It could come into production within 5 or 6 years, start having nuts, or it could have to go through the full maturation process, and it could be 30 years before you have nuts. And again, you don't know what the quality of that nut is. That's why we went with a grafted tree. It kind of take away some of those unknowns. So what did we do during the process of planting? Now, we did not just go out and stick a tree in a hole and walk away. It was a bit of a process. We tried to manage and give these trees the best chance that they could have. We dug our holes by hand. We made sure they were large enough to accommodate that root system. We installed a weed guard. That's that you can kind of see it looks like a black plastic around the tree. And what that does is it helps keep moisture in, help keep weeds out, and makes it so when you're managing weeds with spray that you're not having to use herbicides up close next to the tree. Again, and then we also painted the trees white to prevent sun scald, which is a condition that happens in the springtime when the trees warm up and they start to grow before the conditions are really warm enough to grow, and then it freezes again and causes cracking in the bark. So we painted the trees. We used some tillage radish around the outside of the trees, on the ground to help aerate the soil, provide some green fertilizer. In subsequent years, we did use rye, but yeah, we wanted to keep kind of a cover crop on that area. And then we also put on a rodent guard, that spiral white plastic guard to keep rodents from chewing on the tree and girdling them. And then also some cages around the tree to keep the deer away. So we try to think of all the things that could kill the tree and mitigate those as much as possible. When we received the trees, after we got them in the ground, we went about collecting data on them, measuring their height, measuring their diameter. Now here you can see we planted a lot more Bouche de Benezek and colossal trees than the other varieties. And this has to do with, again, the characteristics of the trees. The Bouche de Benezek and colossal are known for a large quantity of nut production. And so with that, they also don't produce pollen. So they need additional trees to pollinate them. And so that's where our Labor Day and our Marigule and Marsal, Marval, and Precocious Migule come into play, because those are trees that are going to produce a lot of pollen. They also produce nuts, but we refer to those as our pollinator trees and the other ones as our main cultivar trees. So 442 trees in the ground there. And we saw somewhat of a difference in the size of the trees, initial sizes. Some of our trees were rather small, so I guess this was somewhat of a good test for those smaller trees. And then I sometimes get asked, what do you do in the wintertime with chestnuts? And it's really just worry about them. So they don't require much care in the winter. But on our first fall, we had them in the ground 2017. We planted in September. Come November, those trees were not ready for the 10 degrees that hit them. They were still green. They were not dormant yet. So again, this started our worry for the season, for the winter season. Christmas time, we were out there shoveling snow around the trees as insulation. We really wanted to give them the best chance possible, keeping the ground warm as possible. Because when you think about these trees having been planted in September, they're really just in the ground and they're not established. They're really vulnerable to extremes in weather. And so we did our best. Again, more worrying through the winter. And winter just kept going. Here we are, April 16th. Still piles of snow at the house, piles of snow around. And April 21st, we're anxious to see how our trees did over the winter. Still snow on the ground, still going around in the snow. So I guess you could look at that as a silver lining. We had a really good test the first winter. April 21st, our ground was still frozen. And then spring finally arrived. 2018, we're out there looking at the trees, excited to see those buds expanding and growing. So you kind of have a little breathe a sigh of relief that we made it through the first winter and into our first growing season. So this is somewhat of a summary of survival for those first group of trees we planted in 2017. Coming out of that year into the fall of 2018, we assessed survival, and we had 99% of the trees still there. Oftentimes when you talk to people, they will tell you to anticipate at least 10% dying. So we were feeling pretty good that we had at least these guys came through and they were alive that first year. Then we went into 2019 and 2020, and we started to see a little difference in cultivars. However, I think some of that is more due to some unanticipated pest issues. We learned a lot. We learned about the ambrosia beetle, and that took out some trees that maybe were experiencing a little bit of stress. We learned that even though you can plant chestnuts on marginal soils, there is some limit to that also. You know, they will be more stressed on those marginal soils. And so you need to manage that. You need to make sure they're getting enough water. You need to make sure that they really have very low pest pressure, because all those things provide more stress to the trees, resulting in more likely death. In addition, we did see some graft issues that didn't manifest themselves the first year come to light in the second and the third year, where we're seeing those trees that had some graft issues start to lose their graft. And those are noted, not necessarily that the tree died and the rootstock was still viable and growing, but it lost the graft, and we counted that as a tree death. So then in 2018, we planted another 120 so trees. And I think we learned more about managing pests. I think we learned more about planting and really taking care of those trees even better. And so right now in season 3 of that planting, we have a 98% survival. So some really positive numbers for being able to grow chestnuts where we're at. I mean, this seems like it is viable. It is something that we can do. We definitely hit the survival. The survival is working. And how about growth? So here's our initial planting. I could show you different slides and different graphs about that growth. But I think the picture is a little more illustrative of that. So yes, you know, we have survival. Yes, we have growth. There's another one, 2018. This is fall of 2018. So these are trees that have been through one growing season here on the farm. And here is 2021. Just a tremendous growth again. And this is the fall we started getting some nuts. We went out and picked up some nuts. It was worth our time to pick them up. 2017 again, newly planted tree. And 2020 growing faster than the kids. Everybody enjoys collecting the chestnuts, and it was exciting this year to be able to go out and do that and start answering that third question of, are we going to be able to have nuts, or is our growing season to be accommodating for growing quality chestnuts? So yeah, in 2021, we harvested about 1,000 pounds of nuts. When we look at that for wholesale, about $3 per pound. And then with the retail side of things, we have not, nor do we really anticipate going into the retail side of the market, but on the direct market side, it's about $7 to $9 per pound. So we had 1,000 pounds in 2021. This fall, 2022, we'd anticipate being in the 5,000 pound region for harvest, and then upwards from there. Looking at MSU's data on what you can see for future harvest, we could be in the 10,000 pounds in 2023 and this is encompassing all our acreage. This is about 10 acres of chestnuts. So the other side of our project and our question was, what can we do for intercropping, growing a forage between our chestnuts? Because this is what helps make it more possible for making that transition into a specialty crop. What can we do in the meantime while the chestnuts are growing? So our first step before we planted the chestnuts even was to establish a forage. We went with a red clover, white clover, orchard grass kind of mix. So our red clover, fantastic for pollinators, definitely, but also going out there and fixing nitrogen, kind of returning some quality to our soils, giving some extra nutrients to the orchard grass, and hopefully reducing our inorganic fertilizer use. When we planned out our planting, we looked at distance between trees. So what is the spacing we wanted to establish? And one of those questions, one of the factors going into that question was, what size equipment do we have? What is it going to take to be able to make a couple passes down each of these rows to harvest forage? And the great thing about taking a hay crop off of this field, not only do we get a revenue stream or food for our animals, I guess we're not having to buy hay. So we're pulling that forage off of the field, but we're also reducing the amount of inputs to mowing. One of the maintenance issues with the chestnut orchard is mowing the grass. You can't harvest nuts when you have tall grasses, so you're going to have to go out there and mow anyway. So this was great, being able to pull off hay crop, being able to feed our animals, and being able to manage that bonus crop. As we're looking this last year, we're working with the EQIP program to bring in intercropping even further, where we're rotationally grazing the orchard in addition to the hay crop. So we put up perimeter fences around our orchard to be able to bring the sheep in and have them harvest some crop also off of this, where they're recycling nutrients and yeah, kind of a different aspect of our farm. So I guess not only you're pulling forage off, but now you're pulling, you're raising a meat crop, raising those sheep also out there in the orchard. You can see we use temporary fencing to keep them away from the trees, because as the trees are establishing, they're still very vulnerable to damage from their bark from the limbs. We don't want the sheep up next to the trees. And maybe never, maybe when they get bigger, the trees get bigger, they'll be more tolerant of the sheep being close. But again, it helps keeps them away, keeps the manure out from under the trees, where we will be picking up nuts off the ground. Speaking of manure, though, our second SARE project that we worked on was actually talking about using manure with fertilizing the trees. So as a farmer with animals, you have that resource of manure on your farm that also needs to be managed. And it was this project kind of looking at what happens when you take that manure and you use that in place of inorganic fertilizers around your trees. What does it cost? How's the cost difference for putting manure out versus putting inorganics out? How does it affect the organic matter of the soils, macro and micronutrients? How does it help a farmer manage that waste responsibly? So that was the questions we looked at in that project. I'm not going to really go into that much detail, but our report from that project is available on the SARE website. So in the future, where are we going from here? Our farm, we continue to try to diversify, continue to try to look at different ways that we can incorporate multiple things on the same acreage, kind of spreading out our eggs into different baskets. So this last summer, we did do another chestnut planting. We planted another 5 or 6 acres of chestnuts. And this time we intercropped not only our forage between the trees, but also we put chestnut tree or Christmas trees between each of those chestnut trees. We had the irrigation lines we were putting out for the chestnuts. And so those Christmas trees will be able to take advantage of that same irrigation availability and hopefully grow well and be able to yield a crop in that 10-year time frame while we're working on establishing those chestnuts. The chestnut trees are, it's going to take about 10 years for them to get big enough where they would be shading the Christmas trees out, which would be the time when those Christmas trees are ready to be harvested. Additionally, we just received notification that we will be working on another SARE project with intercropping English walnuts, peaches, and the sheep, and doing grazing, forage intercropping again, and kind of looking at that system, if that is a viable system that would work for people. Again, when you're trying to ease that transition, I want to get into specialty crops. What can I do in the meantime? What are things I can put together that's still making good use of my land, but ultimately is going to get me to my goal of a specialty crop? And while we're still doing this, we're not quite ready for my husband to quit the day job yet. You know, definitely it's exciting to see everything growing and with the potential of having larger revenues over the years. And I feel confident we will get there. We're just not right there yet. So I do maintain a website and a blog with different activities that we have on our farm, and that's at oxheights.com. And I have information on, as we've established chestnuts, kind of the things we've learned. What does it take to grow chestnuts? And just some of the other things that we've done around the farm. And so that's a great place I can kind of put information if anybody's interested in seeing more of what we've done with those projects. It's broke down a little further. And finally, a big thank you to SARE, Small Farmer Rancher Grants, who funded part of our initial project, the USDA and EQIP. Errol and Lizette was a great resource as we were researching chestnuts and getting things just established and in line, getting our ducks in a row, answering all our questions. Mario Manito there at MSU, who is a fantastic chestnut resource. James DeDecker, who was our MSU extension agent in Rogers City at the time when we were first starting our project. Dennis Fulbright, who was an expert in chestnuts that really offered us a lot of encouragement. And finally, our kids, who put up with our tree enthusiasm. And everybody that's helped on our project there. Thank you again for having us.
Yeah, great job, Abby. If you got further questions, join us tonight. There's an open forum session, and we're looking forward to seeing a few of you there. If you are ever in Northeast Michigan, look us up and stop by the farm. Thanks for tuning in.
Hello all, my name is Ben Terrell. I'm a graduate student at Michigan State University in Department of Plant, Soil, and Microbial Sciences. I'm a member of the Basso Lab for Digital Agronomy, and so I have a presentation to share with you today. I've sort of paraphrased the title, but we're going to talk a little bit about manure composition and digital agriculture. There's a longer SARE project title I'll give you at the end. That's sort of the gist of what we'll talk about. So really happy to be here today. I've actually been to the Family Farms Conference a number of times, and Michigan Food and Farming Systems was a collaborator on this project. So really happy to share the results of some work with you all today. So to get started, I just want to talk a little bit about Dr. Basso's lab and some of the work that they do and how sort of my project fits into that broader scheme. So this is Dr. Bruno Basso. Many of you maybe have heard of Dr. Basso as sort of the drone guy who does a lot of drone work on crop fields, field crops in the state of Michigan. But I think that's kind of a little bit minimalizes some of the work that he really does. A lot of the work the lab does is around what's called digital agriculture. And so digital agriculture, is a broad term. It just refers to this idea that, we could use sensors and we can use models to better quantify a lot of things that happen in agriculture. And as many of you well know, there's a lot of things happen during a growing season in agriculture. And so they're really at the cutting edge of trying to use technology to help make agriculture more sustainable, to grow the food that we're going to need for a growing global population, but also do that in a way that, we can do things like sequester carbon in soils, or mitigate climate change, and protect waterways, things like that. So really important research, and I think that they've done some really phenomenally cool things. I'll talk about a couple of those. So I guess my big pitch on what digital agriculture is, then, I guess, is just it's sort of understanding variability. It's a lot more than that, but that's the main idea. A lot of these sensors and these models that they use, and the lab is home to what's called the systems approach for land use sustainability. But it's a crop model. It's housed at Michigan State University, and it's one of those very well developed and very well respected global crop models. But all of these things allow us to look within a season just to understand, how this year is different from last year, how this spot in the field is different from other spots in the field. And based on that, farmers can make production decisions, and those obviously have some important consequences. And so I know, that may not be all that meaningful for many on the meeting today, but our project was focused a little differently, just in looking at the fact that some of that variability exists in inputs, namely in animal waste. So given that, animal waste, obviously, for small farms, but for farms of all sizes, manure is a valuable resource. What I think we sort of lose track of, a lot of folks assume that most of the animal waste comes from larger farms. In reality, only about 10 to 20% comes from large confinement facilities. So a lot of animal waste still comes from small or medium-sized farms, and probably a lot like farms that, are on the meeting today. So, and then obviously there's just a tremendous amount of variability. And so this is true, even at those larger scale operations, there's a tremendous amount of variability. But that's even more true, I think, on smaller operations, where, even from one building to the next, or from one part of a building to the next, or one species, you name it, there's just a lot of variability in the content of those wastes. And, that's very important to understand. And in testing, traditional testing, laboratory testing is slow and it's expensive. So again, it's been estimated that only about 20% of farmers as a whole, undertake manure testing. And I would guess that probably, in a group like this, that's probably even lower than that, which is very understandable, because a lot of times it is so expensive it doesn't make a lot of economic sense. So, that's a shame, because, there's also been a lot of data that shows that understanding the content can cost money, or result in pollution. So the project that we undertook used some spectroscopy. And so I'll just try and do, a 10-second overview of what spectroscopy is. So just forgive me here, but, spectroscopy is just sort of a $10 word for saying that, we're using light to analyze things. And so the idea behind this is that, all light, when it bounces off of things, has a frequency, and that, the differences in the way that light bounces off of different compounds can be read with sensors, and we can use that to understand differences. And so those things can be correlated, and we can understand what is in something based on those readings. And so, this is a great technology. Unfortunately, it can't be used for everything. It's based off a lot of these bonds between carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen atoms. And so it works really well for these organic compounds. So things like, understanding proteins or nitrogen content, things like that might be associated with that. It works less well on minerals, things like of that nature. So, but it has been used a fair bit on manure in these type of analyses. So, so what we really undertook to do here, a lot of these analyses had been done when this technology was really emerging about 15 or 20 years ago. But obviously a lot of technology has emerged since then, and unfortunately a lot of this work got abandoned. And so what has become, the change factor here is that this technology has become a lot more accessible in two ways. Obviously, just like all of our other computing resources, become a lot more inexpensive. And then it's also gotten a lot smaller, which I think probably comes as no surprise as well. So, the use of on-site portable methods really could start to make some of these techniques practical. If we still had to take samples and send them to a lab to be used on a $50,000 machine, it still wasn't all that practical to farm use. But if someone could take a handheld device like this and use it on site, there's a lot more application. I think what also is, part of what we were looking at here too were levels of technology too. So the costs have come down dramatically. Both of these devices are, relatively inexpensive in the scheme of things. But the one on the left here, it's estimated these could be made for, $50, something in that ballpark. They're made by a relatively small company called RSI, who was a partner in this project and was a great partner for us. But these devices are coming down a lot in cost, and there's talk about being able to do applications like this with an add-on to your phone or your phone itself in the future. So a lot of exciting possibilities as these things become a lot more accessible. So a brief project overview of what my project composed was that we were going to sample waste from 50 limited resource farms for a variety of components. So we were going to go pull manure samples from 50 farms. MIFS was a great, Michigan Food Farming Systems was a great partner in that, helped us identify farmers. And you'll see the breakdown of kind of what we ended up with here in a minute. But was able to help find cooperators that were all willing to allow us to come on the farm, for me to come on the farm, pull manure samples and do that on site. So appreciate the participation of all those folks, maybe some here today. So we did on-site sampling, all these farms, and pulled traditional grab samples, just in the way that farmers are told to pull manure samples for solid manure. All the farms in the study had to be solid manure, which I don't think was a big hurdle for smaller farms. All small farms are solid manure, so over 20% solids. But they also had to have over 1 cubic meter of manure storage, which is 3 feet by 3 feet. So just that there was a reasonable quantity that we could take a sample from. After we pulled those samples, those were all frozen and then subsequently sent to a traditional lab analysis where they were tested for everything under the sun. So all the components that you would traditionally test for, N, P, and K, but additionally all the micronutrients, what we call micronutrients, things like metals, different other minerals, but then also we tested for components of biological quality, which I think was an important part of what we were looking for, just in understanding that there are certainly these macronutrient differences, but there's also differences in the speed at which manure will become biologically available, right? And that has to do a lot with when we can use it in a crop and what the environmental risks are. So we looked at the acid detergent fiber, what's called acid detergent fiber, but just basically the amount of very hard to decompose material within those as well, to see if we could analyze those using these spectroscopic methods as well. So we also wanted to examine different processing methods. So all along through the project, our goal was to look at a practical and applied way that folks like yourselves could potentially use these things someday, with a actually economically viable device, one that was accessible in cost, but also using methods that you could use on a farm. So used 3 different levels of processing based on kind of a wide literature review on what has been done to make these methods work better, to help get visual light readings off of these. So we did some with no processing at all to examine that. We also did some simple grinding. So we did 3 1-second intervals with a very simple coffee grinder. And then we did a more advanced processing method that involved grinding and drying. So same coffee grinder grinding method, and then also 2 3-minute microwave dries with a stir between. So microwave drying to examine the effective processing on those readings. But so yeah, and then just to examine the 2 devices I showed you there, while they were both relatively reasonable and handheld. One was much more low cost. So the RSI device was a simple reflectometer, pulling 9 bands in what's called the visible spectrum. So if we go back to the slide on spectroscopy, there's a lot of these waves of light. We as humans can't see them all. And so everybody's probably heard about ultraviolet. That's on the low end. And then you have, many have probably heard of near infrared. That's kind of on the higher end. There's a lot of waves even above that. And so, the one device pulled 9 just in the visible, and then the other device was a little more advanced. It pulled 140 some odd waves, more in the near infrared and mid infrared ranges. So, a lot of science there, but the idea is you have a very simple device and a little more complicated and pricey one. So, we're also interested in the implications of this for public policy. There's a lot of talk about regulations for manure application. So, how could using some of this new technology to better make decisions was a big part of what we want to look at. And it's a big part of my own research. So, and then, a big part of what we wanted to do too, and I'll just share this part at the front, is that, there was a hope to do some more survey work. We started doing that, some of the early pieces, and then some more outreach and use of that survey work later on. Unfortunately, partway through the project, COVID happened, and so it did put the clamps on some of our face-to-face survey work pretty quickly. So, I just anecdotally, I think we did deploy some of the survey work early on, and it was pretty interesting to hear, what the participants were familiar with in terms of the guidelines that were available, for smaller farms as it applies to manure application in the state. I think not surprisingly, there was a lot of farms that didn't know about any guidelines. I think there was a number that had heard about things like the Right to Farm Act and standards that were there. Some folks mentioned MEEP and things like that. So I think there's definitely sort of brought to light that there's definitely room for some education there, what the standards are and what's allowed. A lot of farmers are under the impression that, applying manure, even these solid manures in the winter, was against the law. That's not actually the case. And there are areas where that may not potentially conform to the Right to Farm Act, but, in many cases, can be applied, as long as it's done in a responsible way. But, what we're looking at here too are also very stable materials too. So that's where policy, I think, could move forward, and, where there's some materials that may be very low risk in any case. So with that, farms involved in the project. So you can see we had 50 farms. This is the composition by species. Probably not surprisingly, had a very healthy composition of horse farms, beef farms, and poultry. Poultry typically were almost primarily chicken. Then you have some other species in there as well. So, I think this was, certainly, it was a great group of farms to work with. It definitely brings different challenge, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other systems, but you had a lot of diversity in this group of participants. The bedding types, also pretty strong variation in bedding too, which, we'll also discuss a little bit, but you can see that, we had about half used wood, primarily ground sawdust type. That's related to many of your horses. There's things like that. And then you had straw for kind of the predominant. You did have some in there that didn't have an identifiable bedding source. So, and you see here too, just to kind of round out these systems, we had a pretty wide range of moisture content. By and large, these were relatively dry manures, and in terms of, again, we talked about less than 80% moisture being a solid manure, and you can see that all of these are in those categories, and you do have a pretty broad range of moisture content, and you get down to some of these at the end. While that sounds like a fair bit of moisture, that's actually a pretty dry material. So very, very wide, diverse group of farms. So, what that did is, it was great. It was instructional in terms of being able to parse these out. We did have a relatively small sample size. Obviously, it's a relatively small project. And so, that was a little bit limiting in terms of some of the statistical analysis and the things we were able to do. But it was pretty interesting to be able to look at, how applicable could these things really be across all different types of farms. I mean, something we found pretty quickly as we went across farms and we tried to get sort of non-mixed manure samples, but we did find a lot of systems where there was mixed species, and so it even becomes difficult in some of those systems to identify the species, and you had a lot of different things going on. And I think that kind of lent itself to making this robust when we look at what we got out of the results. So as we get into those, I think we did find a few really good relationships, and I'll show a few of these graphically. I think one of the most pronounced was certainly, being able to look at the amount of moisture that was in the manure itself. And I think if we take a step back from kind of the sciencey talk, I think this makes a lot of sense, right? I think everybody that raises livestock on here knows that, manure material, when you're cleaning out a barn, the darker material is likely the wetter stuff, right? So whether that is sawdust bedding or whether that's straw, I think that's universally true. And so that was kind of an expected result. And you see a pretty consistent linear relationship here, which is nice, which is a nice finding. And that in and of itself, I think, is a pretty valuable finding, even if nothing else. Being able to predict the moisture content allows producers to, in a lot of ways, adjust their nutrient application a lot more accurately, because a lot of times you're making a judgment about, we have this book value, but what is the moisture content of our manure? We've weighed it, but how much are we actually putting on? This would allow folks to do that math in a lot more exact fashion. So probably the other big one, I think, is the organic matter content. And so this was maybe a little less anticipated, but also a really strong relationship here between some of these relationships that we were able to predict. And so here is just solids and organic matter content, but that you're able to identify these relationships using the spectral pieces is a big piece. And I'll talk a little bit more about this one, but I think as we move into a world where understanding organic matter content, which means the amount of carbon and carbon bonded material in the manure, as we start talking about farms that are going to look at doing things with carbon sequestration and ecosystem services, it's going to be really important to be able to quantify how much of that you're putting out there and trying to sequester and things like that. And so being able to quantify that's going to be really important. It's going to be important in soils. It's going to be important in the materials going on to soils. So this was a great relationship and a really important relationship. We'll look a little bit more about how strong that was, but an important finding. And so finally, we had, as I mentioned, talked about the sort of the microbial quality of these things. How fast are they going to degrade in the environment, and how quickly will these nutrients be available, whether it's for crops or to escape into say surface waters, things like that. That one was a little harder to do, and some of that's probably attributable to the diversity in our data set. There could be other work. You can see that we did find some of this, and this is this is one specific bedding type, so it sort of illustrates that maybe if we had larger data sets confined to specific production systems, that we might be able to find a greater amount of trends in this data. But this is just one band. It's in the high infrared range, but you can see a relationship here between the acid detergent fiber and that band pretty clearly. And so those things would be very valuable. It didn't hold across the species or across all the different bedding types. So this was kind of confined to wood on this band, but it sort of illustrates that there might be relationships out there if we had a larger data set. But if those could be established, so that was part of the thinking of the study in general, was that the models that Dr. Basso uses are initiated a lot of times on assumptions. But if you could use the same type of sensor technologies to look at these materials and then calibrate those models, you're only going to increase the accuracy and you're going to make better decisions as a farmer. And so this is sort of the same thing here. Ash is just kind of those mineral constituents, but an interesting finding here that you found some of that in the straw, right? And that's probably related to contents with other things in this case, but being able to delve into those relationships in a bigger data set, I think could be valuable. But does look like there's some additional things out there. with that, I'll move on, and I won't spend a lot of time on this because I know this looks really, really bad, but I just want to point out a couple of things here. These are some of the models we created, and we don't have to go into what all these models are, but we created models, and they're different types of statistical models, and we did them for total vegetal nitrogen, solids, and organic carbon. But I'll just draw your attention to the fact that these are the models for the more advanced device, and so that device had 140 some bands, and you're looking at a lot of data, but using sort of machine learning type techniques, statistical techniques, it's able to parse those down and see how much of this differentiation in the amount of nitrogen, solids, and carbon it could identify. And really what I've circled there is just that it can perform pretty well. It pulled out around 10 of those bands for each of those, and could explain anywhere from 70 and 90% of the variability in those. So it does show some strong potential there. But what I think is maybe more interesting, and probably more interesting to this group, is this was the simple device from our side. It's a simple reflectometer. Again, relatively low cost device. So a lot of these type devices out there, there's nothing specific about this one, but I'll draw your attention again to the same set of values. So adjusted R squared, again, it's just a percent of the variability in that thing that is explained. So, while you had only 24% of the variation in nitrogen was explained, you had, 53% and 40% of the differences in the solids and the carbon explained. But what's also really interesting there is you see the bands utilized are only 3, 1, and 1 respectively, right? So we can get a lot of the information using a relatively simple device and using one visible light sensor. And so that goes back to that sort of that intuition, right, that we have about, kind of how much of content is in manure based on just the colors that we can see. And so that was pretty interesting finding, and those were all highly significant, as you can see there. So you sat through my sciencey bit. What's the point? And I promise there is one. So we did some simulation here, or we did some examples here. So we pulled out a farm in each of the species identified here, and we said, so what would happen, if we used a book value? Well, if we used our fancy statistical models here for visual and near infrared, and then, or if we used that laboratory test, right? And so the laboratory test, right, should be the closest to reality. I mean, that's an actual sample that we sent in and had analyzed in a lab, but obviously that takes a lot of time and effort, and expensive, frankly. I mean, it's $40 or $50 to have that sample taken, and then not to mention the shipping cost to get it there. So the lab, we're considering to be correct, but obviously pricey. So you could see that in these examples that obviously the NIR, the more complex model with the more expensive device, gets us pretty close to that lab example, and that's not surprising, so because we said that it's going to get us 90% of the way there anyway. But the visual device, the simple device, gets us a lot of the way there, a lot closer than the book values, which were pretty far off. And there's a lot of reasons that could be the case. I mean, the book values are very general, and frankly, going back to our discussion about how variable the manure is on any specific farm, there's just a ton of variability. So a different criteria is used to sample these places, looking in different locations or things like that. Maybe pull samples that are a little more related to those Midwest. Those are values from Midwest Plant Service, but again, it just shows you how much room there is to improve. So book values, especially for solid manure, especially the published ones that are out there, are very general, and a lot of the samples in our study, which were primarily taken in winter months too, so maybe that has something to do with it too, but they were a lot more nutrient dense, and so we could gain a lot of extra information there, and you can see that what the effect that would have on application rates, and that's what these are, is application rates. So folks could be over applying solid manure if they're applying at the maximum rate based on things like phosphorus or nitrogen if they weren't adjusting. And so in conclusion, kind of to wrap up on what we found in our project, I think that this is something that maybe many have known for a long time, but book values, the published book values that are out there, may not mean a whole lot in any specific situation, right? All of our farming systems, all of your farming systems on the call today are very different, and so How good any kind of averaged out book value might be is very debatable. And so especially that might be especially true on small farms where the systems can just vary so dramatically. But digital agricultural techniques could help farmers understand manure content quickly and inexpensively. And I think those are the big advantages, right? We all only have so much time, and obviously money is always an issue. So if there's a way that, we could quickly and easily identify, sort of what's in these manures, then it could be helpful. But probably more work is needed. Our study was small, kind of initial study, especially in terms of many of these studies have been done on liquid manure. I think with the application that, these could be like sort of in line on liquid manure application systems, but more work is needed, especially in solid manure. And you really would, a lot of these type of tools would have to be calibrated across specific types of systems. So say, for example, all horse farms with sawdust bedding and feeding, even feeding similar type feeds would improve the quality of the model. But I think it is illustrative that there's a lot out there that could be used in potentially in the future, creating more modernized policy standards that could account for diversity in farming systems. So, as we noticed there's huge difference in the amount of, organic carbon that's in these manures. And so just a lot of these very high, high fiber, very slow to break down manures are not going to be, as environmentally potentially harmful and are not going to release nutrients for crops nearly as quickly. And so I think creating some logical policy that, sort of recognizes that diversity in systems is going to be important. So it just shows that that's possible, and that, as we sort of start to integrate these tools into the framework, that we might be able to get there. So, and I think that final point about carbon, I think is going to be important. I think, don't know fully how all of that is going to materialize in the future, but I think probably many of you were thinking about climate change and potentially even ecosystem service markets. A lot of questions there, many more questions than answers, but folks are starting to look at that as an additional revenue source to, take advantage of some of the good things they're doing for the environment and the positive impact they're having in the climate realm. And so a tool like this, where you can quantify the amount of carbon that's being put out onto a landscape, I think has some real application in the future. So, something to keep in the back of your mind. So with that, I'd be happy at any point if anyone would like to contact me about the study or questions about anything I've said here. I feel more than free to contact me. My email and phone number is here. You can see the SARE project number, so you can go on and read it. It's GNC 19-290, and has, this is why I paraphrase the name, has the name of Integrating Manure Composition from Portable Spectroscopy with Simulation Modeling to Evaluate Long-Term Dynamics of Manure Mineralization and Sustainability of Cropping Systems. So kind of a mouthful, but the full project's there. If you contact me, I'd be happy to send it to you as well. So I really appreciate the opportunity to participate and take part again in the conference, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your proceedings.
Hello, I'm Katie Brandt with the MSU Student Organic Farm and Organic Farmer Training Program. Today we're going to be looking at the map of Michigan farmer resources, and we'll have a tour of the map, but we're also going to have a tour of all of the great resources that are out there for finding land and money and markets for your farm or your future farm. So I work at the MSU Student Organic Farm. It is a 15-acre farm. We do about half acres of hoop house growing. We have about 4 acres in outdoor tractor scale vegetable production, and 2/3 of an acre of a permaculture edible forest garden. So it's a great place for learning. That's where I have the great honor of teaching the Organic Farmer Training Program. So that's half out on the farm and half in the classroom. It's all interactive learning and a great place to learn alongside other aspiring and beginning farmers, farm workers, educational gardeners, homesteaders. It's really a great mix of folks. You write a business plan, you visit 20 or 25 different sustainable farms around the state, and you have the opportunity for all of the hands-on learning as well. In addition to that, I teach an undergraduate class, which covers some of the same topics. Not as much focus on farm business planning, but it's an organic farming introduction class. I lead the Michigan Sustainable Farm Mentors Program. I highly encourage people to get involved. We have 1 more year of funding, and we are recruiting folks right now. So you get paid as an aspiring or beginning farmer for your time that you're spending connecting with an experienced farmer and connecting with a peer, someone who is also an aspiring or beginning farmer and has similar interests to you. The experienced farmers we work with are amazing. They have experience growing vegetables both at the tractor scale and at urban farms that are really intensive. We have cut flower growers and livestock farmers doing rotational grazing. Really a good mix of folks. So what we're looking for here. So there's a thank you to our funders, North Central SARE, that did the development of this map. You can go to the map directly. There's a survey. There's a 6-minute long video about how to use the map, and info on how to connect and share this resource. So we're going to go ahead and follow the link. It takes a minute, and in our surveys and meeting with both educators and with beginning and aspiring farmers, this is one of the challenges with the map. We have placed the statewide programs in Lake Michigan. There's not actually any programs out there, but it makes it easy to find and kind of a directory of those programs. If you zoom in, you can kind of see what those statewide programs are. EnviroWeather is a great example, so that farmers can know just exactly how much rain and what the temperatures are in their region. They have quite a few locations around the state. And how I like to use this map is I hit this present button, and then you can go through the programs alphabetically. This first page, the Michigan Beginning Farmers Programs page, outlines what are the different icons. So as you can see, the green barn is for farms and hands-on learning. Purple tree is for land access opportunities. Red dollar symbols, those are for money, loans, and grants and financial education. Then we've got the yellow check marks are marketing opportunities. Blue quotes for conferences. Gray star is for advocacy organizations. And I'll say this for these, but it's true for quite a few of these organizations. They might be doing multiple things, so I had to choose what seemed to be the main focus of their work. And then the tan clouds are mostly online opportunities. So what you can do in the tour is you can just move through alphabetically is how these are arranged. So here's a marketing opportunity, another marketing opportunity, the Agricole Farm Stop Now this is, I would say, mainly a marketing opportunity. Allen Neighborhood Center manages a farmer's market. They have an incubator kitchen. They do a multi-farm CSA, but it's also a hands-on learning opportunity. They have this Hunter Park Garden House where they do workshops. They have classes. They have an edible park. It's not shown really well in this map. This isn't really updated, but they're putting in orchard plants for the community to enjoy. The other way that you can move through the map is just by using the table of contents and finding the resources that you're looking for that way. So perhaps you're interested in a career tech center. So this is taking us to the Career Tech Center that's up in the Traverse City area. But as you can see on the listing, there's quite a few others listed. We've got Ottawa ISD as well. And there's others around the state. So certainly you can check out the state map to see what's in your region. Going back to the table of contents, let's take a look. Let's see. Let's look at the Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship program. This is a really neat program. So each of these listings has a video. Let's see how these work. It kind of does a pop-up.
To me, really, it's just the thrill of sharing something that we're passionate about and something that we've made a lifestyle from.
You know, it takes a certain type of person to really want to do what we do here.
I think it's great to have experience before you own your own farm.
Dairy farming is an important part of rural economies. Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship is the first formal apprenticeship for farming in the nation.
So I won't show the whole video, but that shows you kind of how it works, and then you can close out the pop-up and take a closer look at the listing itself. Now this does not look like a dairy farm, as you can see. This is a program that is managed by MIFS, Michigan Food and Farming Systems, and they're in Okemos, but there's 11 farms throughout the state that host this Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship program. And there's a couple of different levels. As you can see, there's both an apprenticeship and an internship, and they have different requirements and different pay rates and different information that you'll learn. There's it looks like a really excellent class that's offered online as part of it. So that's kind of how you can scroll through the table of contents, and there's a little over 90 resources listed. Sometimes you can find things you're looking for. If you don't find them at first, if you go through the Michigan and MSU section, they may be listed there if they're part of MSU. Or if they have Michigan in their name and you didn't think. So for example, Farm Bureau is not under F, it's under F, it's under M for Michigan. So the other way to use this map, let's take a look. Let's go to the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund. So they have been in the past 2 years able to meet their funding goal, their fundraising goals, to help farmers in the city of Detroit, help Black farmers in the city of Detroit own the land that they're farming on, so that they're not at risk of losing that farm site. It is a collaboration between multiple farm organizations. So I put it at D-Town Farm, but Keep Growing Detroit and Oakland Avenue Farm are also important partners and equal in leadership with Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. And so annually they are taking applications from Black farmers in the city of Detroit to help them buy the land they're already farming on. So one of the ways we can use this, I'm just going to scroll out so that we can see Detroit. You can see up here Detroit Partnership for Food Learning and Innovation. That is a new MSU extension site doing education work on the northwest side of Detroit here. We've got Drew Farm and Detroit School Garden Collaborative, an awesome program. But let's zoom in here and we'll see. Now this is just showing aspiring and beginning farmer resources. There are so many farms in the city of Detroit where I'm actually working with an undergraduate class on creating a map of job opportunities at sustainable farms around the state, and that would include quite a few more farms than we see here, but it would not include things like the Detroit Community Wealth Fund, Detroit Land Bank Authority, Michigan Women Forward, Eastern Market. It would include Earthworks Farm, Keep Growing Detroit, and other farms that are located in the city. So that's another way to use this map. And I've zoomed in on Detroit here, but you can do this in any region. Ann Arbor, you can take a look at the resources. There's a ton in Lansing. There's some things up in the Upper Peninsula that are really interesting. And you can just click on these links and it will zoom in. So let's take a look at the MSU Upper Peninsula Research and Education Center, often called the North Farm, the MSU North Farm, their Farm Business Incubator program. So here's the listing. Participants have access to land, farm equipment, farm infrastructure, housing, training, mentorship, and on-farm assistance with business planning. So the fees are all listed here. I'll link to the program and a video as well. And you can see the farm in the map. They've got a great setup up there. They have housing on site at very low cost, and it's just a really great opportunity up in the north. So a second resource that I put together was a chart of these programs. So I'll scroll to the top here. So this was the map of Michigan Beginning Farmer Resources chart of Michigan Beginning Farmer Resources. And what I did was I used the same color scheme as we have in the icons on the map, and the same categories. I added one or two categories. I added this business and financial training category. I added a workshops category. And so if we want to take a look at just land, you can just scroll through and see, oh, okay, Ann Arbor Township Farm, that's an incubator farm. Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund, we discussed that. That's a BIPOC land access opportunity. Detroit Land Bank Authority is a land bank. Genesee County Land Bank, Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy. So the land banks make urban vacant lots and lots adjacent to people's homes and larger sites in the city available when they're not occupied. And there's some great programs for that around the state. I'd say the one in Ingham County is just fantastic. They have a tool sharing library and they have a shared greenhouse. They have they'll come in with their tractor and till and put in plastic mulch. And even I knew someone who had kind of a larger plot. She had like a 3/4 of an acre site on the east side of the city of Lansing. And it was, I don't remember exactly, but it was less than $100 per year to access that site. So very low cost. And some of those are assisted by the Greater Lansing Food Bank Garden Project, is another program that's great for those city farmers in Lansing. Grow Benzie is an incubator farm. I mentioned Ingham County Land Bank. Whoops. Leelanau Conservancy. So MIFS has the Women in Agriculture Farm near Flint. My Farm Link is a website with resources for land access. Tollgate Farm has an incubator site. They're also, they have an internship and apprenticeship program. We visited in the map the MSU UPrec farm, and Urbandale Farm is a land access opportunity in Lansing. Washtenaw County Black Farmer Fund, real similar to that fund we talked about for Detroit. And there's the WIA Farm, organized by MIFS. So this is the chart, and I'm not going to go through everything, but I thought it would be useful to just look at land. So for credit, loans, and grants, what we'll do is we'll move into a listing I had in PowerPoint. We'll just go back to that. Here's the full chart. We'll take a look at a map that is by layer that I'm working on with a student, so that beginning and aspiring farmers, or you yourself, can sort and just look at land access or just look at loan opportunities. Just look at hands-on learning opportunities on farms. You can just look at marketing opportunities, just conferences, just advocacy organizations, just online resources. These are MSU Extension, either the county offices, it could be a research farm, and other MSU Extension sites. So to see this kind of in list format, loans, grants, and financials are really important key to getting your farm started. And the way I have the loans organized is by the top few are arranged by interest rate. So the Farm Service Agency loans are the best interest rate, but they're not available to everyone. So if you're just looking to buy equipment or seeds and supplies, those could be purchased, or those loans could be accessed if you have 1 year of farm experience, and that year could be owning your own farm and having a Schedule F. But it could be taking a program like the Organic Farmers Training Program that I teach. It could be experience of leadership as a veteran. It could be working with a mentor as you start your farm. If you want to buy land with a Farm Service Agency loan, that requires 3 years of experience, and only one of those years can be an alternative to something like being a farm worker who has management level responsibility related to production, marketing, and financials, or owning your own, and it can even be a quite small farm business, and filing a Schedule F, the farm tax form, when you do your taxes. The second best, I believe, in terms of interest rates is Greenstone. So Greenstone does loans, kind of like the Farm Service Agency. They'll do land purchase loans, but they'll also do loans or even a revolving line of credit for established farmers. The Good Food Fund is an excellent option. The people at the Good Food Fund are very knowledgeable and will help get your financial plan in order to help you ensure success on your business, as well as offering loans. Small Business Agency, of course, Detroit Community Wealth Fund, Food and Farm microloans are kind of a neat opportunity if you're in the northwest part of the state. I think it's a 5-county region funded by a couple of food co-ops up there. So Kiva Zip loans are online. It's a crowd-funded opportunity, but all the farmers I've known who have sought Kiva loans have been able to get them very quickly. They were funded in less than a week in some cases, folks I know. Northern Initiatives, Steward, Fair Food Fund, and MDARD grants and loans are other opportunities. So there's good financial education around the state. I just have a couple of them listed. Grand Rapids Opportunities for Women, and Grand Rapids is great. I took classes there before I got my farm started. The SBDC has locations around the state, so that's the Small Business Development Center. And then grants, there's tons and tons of grants out there, but I put the few that I think are most important. So American Farmland Trust has a new program. I think it's just a few months old, the Brighter Future Fund, that has $5,000 grants for beginning farmers. There are REAP solar energy grants to assist farmers in having solar power on site. Natural Resource Conservation Service has a program called EQIP, and they have other cost share programs as well. A lot of small scale farmers are using EQIP to buy things like a hoop house, maybe put in fencing for rotational grazing, and you put up all of the funds and build the infrastructure. They come out and work with you and make sure that it's meets all the standards, and then you get a cost share. So they essentially refund you a portion of the cost of that. And I think most farmers are in the 70 to 80 or 85% range on that cost share. So you only end up paying, for 15 to 30% in the end. SARE grants are another good one, and I talked about those at the start of the video. So land access, this is the biggest barrier for a lot of beginning farmers. My Farm Link is a great one to check out, and that has resources from all over the state. It was developed in Ottawa County, but they have good links to farms that are available right now, and other programs. So Incubator Farms, I talked about the one at UPREC a little bit, but the idea of a farm incubator is that a beginning farmer can access land, essentially lease land on a site that is developed with resources in mind to help a farmer get started. And so and then they would be able to build up experience so that they could qualify for those farm service agency loans. They can build up their markets so that the financial wheels are turning in their business once they do have to make loan payments. And there's Incubator Farms, as you can see, in the Ann Arbor area. So many successful farms have come out of what was once known as Tillian Farm and is now the Ann Arbor Township Farm. So Green Things and Sealy, so many great farms came out of there. Grow Benzie is up in the northwest part of the state. Land's really expensive up there and in high demand. So this is a good opportunity. It has, I believe, all of these have both some protected growing space, some hoop house space, as well as field space. And Grow Benzie's kind of has a larger, older gutter connect greenhouse. In addition to some field space. Women in Ag Farm is over by Flint. Tollgate Farm is in Novi, so southeast Michigan. Land banks and land conservancies I talked about a bit, and the BIPOC land funds. So farms and hands-on learning opportunities, so many listed. I'm not going to read them all, but it's good to know that there's so many programs out there. Thank you so much for joining me for this map of Michigan Beginning Farmer Resources tour. We got to see a lot of great programs. There are so many more programs than I can talk about in a short video. But certainly feel welcome to reach out to me at brantk7@msu.edu. You can also just, Google MSU Student Organic Farm, map of Michigan Beginning Farmer Resources, and it should come up.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the question and answer period for the SARE Farmers Forum sessions this morning. I'm Dean Boss, Sustainable Ag Educator for Michigan State University Extension, and I'm also the SARE Coordinator for the state of Michigan. And I have with me here today Ben Terrell, Abby Johnson, and Katie Brandt. They were your presenters for the session earlier. And just to kick things off a little bit, I'll just ask each of you just to kind of just introduce yourself again to the group so they know who you are, and maybe just a little bit about yourself. Ben, if you'd like to start.
Sure, absolutely. My name is Ben Terrell. I am a graduate student in the Department of Plant and Soil Sciences at Michigan State University. I work in the BASO lab for digital agronomy, and I also work for the Michigan Farm Bureau. So I work on environmental legislative issues for the organization, and I come from a family farm. I'm a 7th generation family farmer just outside of Charlotte, Michigan. So still do a little bit of farming in my spare time, such as it is still today. So thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Abby?
Hi, I'm Abby Johnson, and I currently have a farm in Northeast Michigan where we are working towards having I have about 10 acres of chestnuts now in, and additionally we try to do diverse farming practices. We have some sheep, a little bit of everything going on. But my background is I graduated from Michigan State University in the Department of Biosystems Engineering. That was about 13, 14 years ago now. Well, I've never worked in that field. I feel like I can apply my studies here on the farm, but that's about what we're at.
Okay, thanks, Abby. Katie?
Hello, I'm Katie Brandt. I work at the MSU Student Organic Farm, and I teach the MSU Organic Farmer Training Program. The video I shared was about the map of beginning farmer resources that that SARE helped to fund me putting together. And I will put the link in the chat when I get a second. I also am able to work with students. I was a little late to join this group. I was just finishing up teaching an undergraduate class. And my background, I owned a farm for 12 years in West Michigan producing organic vegetables. Thanks for having me here.
Okay, thank you, Katie. I want to encourage everybody, if you have questions for any of the panelists or for myself, go ahead and put them in the comment box below the video, and those will get fed to us. And so we got one question to start out with for Abby. What are you most excited about on the farm this year?
Probably one of the most exciting things for me this year is going in last year we started doing rotational grazing in in between our chestnut trees, and that I had about 12 ewes and their lambs that we worked through, and that was the first year we had done that. And just seeing how successful that was that year, I'm excited here this next season to kind of expand that and have our be raising pastured lambs between our chestnut trees. And we'll be lambing here. No, probably next week we'll start having lambs come hit the ground, and that's exciting for me to see kind of some of our different intercropping and our systems start working together, doing less mowing with the truck and the tractor, and more converting that material into another product. So.
How do you market your sheep? Are you growing sheep for meat, or are you growing wool, or both? Or
yes, I have hair sheep, so that's primarily for meat, or that's pretty much their sole purpose is for meat. And I plan on doing some direct sales this year. Last year we just went through normal market sales for our lambs that were finished.
okay, thank you. Ben, I got a question for you. So how do you think the technology you've been working on, how close do you think we are being able to go buy one and use it? I mean, is it close in our future, or just kind of what's your gut feel for it, how quickly it's evolving?
Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely go and buy one today. The technologies are there. I think it's just sort of working on all the different applications. So, you know, these guys are really, the sky is the limit in terms of all the different things we can do with it. You know, they're doing some applications now on nutrient quality for things like produce. You know, there's applications that are here today. So Abby mentioned sheep. There's a lot of use of these devices in hay. You know, and I think these are very intuitive things, are the ones that come out first. But you know, you can tell a good hay by its color, and that shows up pretty empirically when folks create those relationships. So yeah, a lot of those devices are used for analysis of hay and forages. And so, you know, things like the analysis of organic materials, like we looked at in the study, you know, are a little more, a little farther off and a little more research based at this point. But I think there's a lot of applications that are going to emerge, especially as the cost of the technologies comes down. I think that's been the main inhibitor for a lot of the use of these on farms, is just the kind of the really high price for some of the equipment in past years.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is for all three of you. So I'm going to let you all kind of answer. I'll pick on you one at a time, but all of you have received SARE grants. I know that. Ben's was a graduate student grant. Abby is on her third Farmer Rancher grant, if you didn't know that. And Katie has a Farmer Rancher grant too, right, Katie?
Mine is actually a partnership grant.
Yours is a partnership grant.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Katie, because you haven't had a chance to talk yet. And people are wondering if you've got tips for people who are interested in applying for SARE grants.
Yeah, and I think the first tip that I would add is just that SARE grants are the best entry point into accessing grant funding. I feel like SARE really wants to make this accessible to farmers and food system activists and people who don't necessarily know what I call grantees, the language of grant writing. It needs to be a clearly written grant. You need to have goals that you can attain, but it doesn't necessarily have to come from a professional grant writer. I think one of the nice things with the partnership grant is that it's a partnership between growers, farmers, producers, and a specialist. That could be an educator such as myself. It could be someone who's managing a cooperative, for example, to come together for a shared goal. And so that's one good alternative. I'm also pretty familiar with the youth grants, the youth educator grants, and that one, you know, the amount of writing is pretty minimal, and it's a $6,000 grant, so it really can make a difference for small educational gardens and outreach to youth. And yeah, all of the grants that I've seen through SARE look fantastic.
Okay, Abby, you got any tips for the producers in the group on how to apply for, or just about the process and how you apply and all that?
Yeah, I think SARE has, so it is really friendly for people who aren't super versed in grant writing. And additionally, the first year we applied, we didn't get our funding, but we learned a lot about the process, and we learned where we could improve our proposal. And I think even though we didn't get funded, it was constructive for us to even just to think about what goes into that process and what we needed to include and what would make our project better. And even just talking to people as we put that project together. I know we talked to Dean and we talked to other people, other educators, and that just talking with people gave us so much information and knowledge. So just going through the process is very healthy. Additionally, SARE is, it can be a little intimidating to think about sitting down and writing a grant. However, even from a cost time perspective, when people can consider how much financial assistance they can receive for the amount of time it does take to put together, it's a big win or a positive for a farmer when they're looking at projects they have. That these questions we want to ask. Well, one of my projects was, do we apply manure? Do we do inorganic fertilizers? Well, what's the balance in that? Well, no one's really explored time-wise what it's going to take to do that. And so it helps answer questions for us. It helps give us the freedom to pursue those questions because of the financial support, and then being able to share that information with others. So that's my experience. And again, I just encourage people to go through the process if they do have ideas for projects.
Thanks, Abby. And I think she pointed out one really good tip there is, once you've gone through the process, if you don't get it, don't quit. Change what they asked you to change or the comments that they give you, and submit it again. You've done the bulk of the work the first time, so tweak it. A lot of times you'll get it on. I know people who have applied 2 or 3 times before they've gotten it, but once they've got it, then they're in the system. Ben, you got any tips from your grant writing experience?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I just echo the sentiment that it's a pretty straightforward and relatively friendly grant to write. So having participated in submitting a few grants, I think this one's really, really friendly in comparison to a lot of grants out there. So if there's grad students there, it's really accessible, and I think that's one of the great pieces about it. It can be a smaller project, which is really nice too. A couple other pieces I've just point out. I think the focus on partnerships for us was really, really nice and really important. We partnered with MIFS on this project, so that was a great partner, and they were a huge help to us. And I think the focus on that allowed us to potentially receive the grant. So I think that was great. And then finally, I would just add the flexibility. Obviously our project took place during the pandemic, and everything that could go wrong kind of did, but they were great to work with. The grant system is really easy to work with, and the folks were very accommodating, understanding throughout what was really kind of a crazy time. So it was really a good process for us.
Okay, thank you. Have another question about what are the differences in the different grants available? And I guess since I'm the coordinator, I probably need to answer that one. SARE has a number of different grant programs, and they're really targeted kind of to different purposes and different groups. Their big grant program is the Research and Education grant program, and they also have a professional development program, and those are targeted towards bigger organizations, universities, nonprofits, and folks like that. And they tend to be multi-year and in the higher dollar level amounts, like up to $250,000 for the R&D program. But they also have the grant programs that are directed just to producers, and only producers can apply for those. And that grant program typically receives about 120 applications a year, and they fund right around 40 or 50. So it's a pretty good hit rate as far as grant programs go. So I encourage people to participate in those, and definitely contact your state coordinator to help you with the process and give you some tips. There's a youth educator grant, which is specifically for youth education, 4-H, folks who are doing youth programs. That's a good grant program. And then, as Katie referred to, the partnership grant, which is between an educator and farmers. But if you want to learn more about grant programs and writing tips and all those types of things, there's a session this afternoon starting at, I forget what time it starts, but it's the session this early evening. And I will be talking about grant writing, grant tips, and more about SARE grants. And I will be available after that. That program starts at 6 p.m. and there'll be a question and answer session after that. So if you've got more questions about grant programs, we can address them then. So I'm going to jump into a few more questions for our presenters. Abby, one of the things I was really struck by about what you're doing is your long-term view. I mean, you're talking 10, 20, 30 years out. How do you maintain that? How do you how can you think on those kind of time frames and stay enthusiastic and stay in the moment on it?
Yeah, it is long term. Perhaps, we do have a bit of a love for trees, and I think anybody who loves trees thinks about their lifespan and so you're not thinking about your generation, you're thinking about the next generation. And yeah, I guess it takes a little bit of practice to think about things with a little more vision. And it can be somewhat challenging also, because you want to have those returns right now.
Yeah.
And I feel privileged that we don't have to get an income off the farm today. My husband has a job off the farm that, the farm isn't supporting our family. I would like to say that in 10 years, perhaps it will be, so,
Yeah.
providing an income and supporting our family. And so I feel that's somewhat of a privilege that we have in being able to take that long view and saying, well, we're going to plant this today. It will be 10 years before we get a crop, and it's not just we put it in the ground and walk away. It does involve care. Every we visit the trees often, let's put it that way. We do our rounds, every week, looking at them and taking care of them. And so it's a little different than an annual crop where you're putting it in the ground and you're taking it out in a short amount of time. But I guess I'm not sure I have any tips for people to develop kind of a longer view, but I encourage people that you can think both ways also, that you can try to get stuff in the ground that's going to be there in 10, 15 years, and hopefully look for ways that you can get a crop also in the current year. So, because ultimately those 10, 15-year crops are going to be highly profitable in the future. And ultimately, when I think about planting those crops, if my children chose to farm or wanted to stay on the farm and in this area of the state, they would need something that was going to be more profitable than the row crop agriculture that's currently being practiced here.
Yeah. And I think you pointed out in your presentation just how dramatically you're altering the landscape. That really stuck with me, that comparison between the annual row crop and then the permanence of the orchard and like that. I thought it was pretty cool. So
I'm sure some of those old timers are rolling in their graves, thinking about clearing the land and burning all the stumps. And here I am planting trees again. But
yeah.
perhaps they'll forgive me.
Okay. Well, Ben, the thing that struck me on yours is one of the big concerns with manure is phosphorus. Did you get any kind of relationship with phosphorus, or did you test that, or where'd you end up on phosphorus?
Yeah, we sure did. We tested for it. We didn't really expect a relationship. So, unfortunately, that technology just looks at certain chemical bonds, and phosphorus isn't one of them. So, what I would say, there's probably ways in the future that people might look at that. So phosphorus reacts a little more to ultraviolet light. So not to get too technical, but kind of in the presentation, we talk about the spectrum of light. And so you have, to the one end, you sort of have ultraviolet, and there's a little more possibility there. But, I think the idea of, regardless of, the total mass of phosphorus that's in there, I think, understanding how available it is, I think, is an important piece too. So, not all phosphorus is the same. If it's not going to degrade quickly in the environment, it's a little more friendly. So I think that's where, this type of technology can help farmers understand when those nutrients are actually going to be available in the environment or to their crops or, trees, whatever it is, and not just, assume that it's all bound up, or it's all going to be available at one time. So yeah, still a lot of work to do on that though, and phosphorus would be something great to continue to work on.
Well, I would guess also that if you could do a better job of quantifying the solids in your manure, then you can better use the book values for how much phosphorus and nitrogen might be there as well. So that's probably really beneficial.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that actually works really well for things like liquid manure. Unfortunately, a lot of small farms don't have that type of system. It can be just varied depending on bedding systems and all these different things. But yeah, and more uniform materials, it works really well that way.
Okay. Katie, I'm guessing there may be some people out there who looked at your map and said, I'm not on Katie's map and I want to be.
Oh, yeah.
What should they do? How do they go about getting on your map?
Yeah, I will drop my email address into the chat box. You can also just contact me. On the map is my contact info, or you can search for the website describing the map, and my contact info is there. We have a survey also, so people can share any sort of feedback, whether they want to be listed, edit a current listing, or add an organization that they're part of or that they're aware of as being important in their community for working with beginning and aspiring farmers. So great question. Thanks, Dean.
So you encourage them to also give you ideas of other organizations. It maybe not be for them, but they know of an organization that ought to be on there. They ought to let you know that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
And there's my email address, just popped up in the chat.
Okay. Any pitch for the student organic farm you want to give folks as far as like where you're at in the process, when you'll be signing up a new group, any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for those in the East Lansing area, if you're interested in getting fresh local produce year round, you can join the CSA, the Community Supported Agriculture Program, as a member. And we do, even though I still say year round, we do take a little 6-week break that's coming up soon. And then we'll start we're accepting payments right now, but we'll start distributing that produce again in May.
Okay. So Ben, you must be graduating with your master's, I'm assuming. So is someone picking up the project and to take it forward? Are there any plans to take your work forward and refine it further, or where are we at on it?
Yeah, I hope that does happen. We're kind of looking at this too. A lot of my master's thesis work is looking at policy, and so how digital agriculture can influence policy. So this is sort of one of the components of a bigger conversation about how, you know, digital agriculture can change these things and foster new types of policy. So well, I think that's kind of the end goal. Hopefully this little piece along the way will build on a body of work that's already looking at this technology and different applications. So hopefully.
Okay, not going to continue on with a PhD?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, I thought I'd throw it out there at least. Okay, we were actually talking a little bit before as the presentation was winding up. As a group, we were on chatting a little bit, and Abby was talking about the market opportunity in the Christmas arena and providing the greenery for Christmas. And I thought maybe you could tell people a little bit more about that. I'm not sure very many people know that's an opportunity out there, Abby.
Yeah, it's something that we've come across, and it seems that the market demand exceeds that which people can supply. But it's actually the cutting of, we call, folks around here refer to it as brush, or just the greenery tips, usually about 2 to 3 foot in length, that you're taking off the tree. So not actually killing the tree in any way. But we cut off of balsam is your primary tree that we've cut from. So balsam, white pine, red pine. We do some spruce. Really a lot of, if it's green, they're interested in taking it and making Christmas wreaths and garlands. Cedar again is another one. And we found that it's just a great way for people who have some land with the trees on it, some property, or even as a farmer looking at maximizing some low value land. Maybe it's not great for cropping, but it would support growing balsam. Balsam, at least here up in the northeast portion of the lower peninsula, is a weed. It just grows everywhere. And so it's great that you could then go in and cut it. And it's really, you know, when we're cutting in the, going at it, I guess, cutting well, if it's good conditions for cutting, we can be easily making $40 to $50 each per hour when we're cutting. And again, it's just selling a bulk product. So it's very, I mean, I like it because you cut it and you sell it and you don't, you're kind of done on it. And for, you know, people in the farming mindset, oftentimes that's great. I don't have any interest in getting involved in retail sales. So for me, that's great. And it's again, it's just a way that you can kind of diversify incomes off of the farm and off of your wooded acreage. Yeah, so if anyone's interested in that, exploring kind of that aspect of the market, Christmas greenery, I know there are some resources available from some of the extension groups, especially in places like Maine, New Hampshire, that offer some guidance on that. But again, in Michigan, there's a lot of buyers that we found. Again, in the north area, we tend to have more people who cut, but again, talking with the folks, most of their cutters probably averaged age of 70. So it's something they're really concerned about, is not enough people kind of continuing that practice. And again, demand continues to exceed supply.
Okay, thank you. We got a question for Katie. Do you find that most graduates of the Student Organic Farm Training Program move on to one of the resources from the map you created, or what do they typically do next?
Yeah, so the Organic Farmer Training Program has a good mix of folks who are taking it. And so some are already in a management role for an educational garden or a production farm. And for them, they often stay with that for a few years, and then they may move on to farms of their own. Some of our participants either buy land during the program or have, you know, had a successful career, bought a farm, but then realized, I think I really want to write a farm business plan and see some other farms and get some more skills. And so for those folks,
They may be using some of the resources related to production and learning more skills. For the people who are managing farms but don't own land of their own, they may be moving on to some of the incubator farm sites. They may be partnering with an existing farm to access some land through leasing it to get their farm going, or they may be accessing some of the loan options that are listed on the map, or using land bank land that's available in a lot of the urban areas in the state. So I would say both from the Organic Farmer Training Program and the Michigan Sustainable Farm Mentors Program that I manage for aspiring and beginning farmers, most of these folks are accessing some resources and are excited to learn about them. You know, they might be doing the high tunnel system through NRCS grant, cost share, things like that. So there's so many resources out there that there's usually a couple that are a good fit for the beginning and aspiring farmers I'm working with. Great question. Thanks, John.
Yeah. When you brought up NRCS, that reminded me that Abby, you referred to the fact that you're getting NRCS cost share type price. So you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, are you?
No.
You're taking advantage of a lot of programs. Are there any other programs we should know about you're taking advantage of?
Definitely NRCS, the EQIP program, and SARE has been the primary ones we've worked with. However, I think we've also done some work with a DNR in just doing wildlife habitat grant funding for planting some of the evergreens in addition to oaks and other wildlife trees. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And again, that's another thing I encourage people to look at and take advantage, because not only is NRCS a great resource for information, I mean, when you can aid someone who's trying to get into farming, it's just, you start implementing practices that you otherwise probably wouldn't have, just because it's cost prohibitive initially. But ultimately it is going to set your farm up better in the future, more sustainably in the future, and you're not damaging the resources you have available. So again, I encourage anybody to work with their NSGS offices.
Did you know anything about chestnuts before you started this?
Absolutely nothing. No, I hadn't even had a chestnut when I started talking with people.
So you can find the information out there, talk to your extension agent. And
absolutely. And you know, everybody of these things. Everybody is always so willing to help and share their information. And it's, yeah, just seeking out those people who know what they're talking, you know, have the experience. And again, everybody's been very excited to share in mentorship on these projects.
Well, we don't have any more questions, and I'm kind of out of questions, but I would like, if any of you have anything else you'd like to add for our audience today for the conference, if you'd like to open your mic and anything you'd like to tell the group, I'll give you a chance to do that. Katie, I see you've opened up.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone at MIFS in putting together this conference in a way that's so accessible for everyone to be able to join. And they've put together a fantastic lineup of different breakout sessions. So thanks, Jen, and all of you who worked so hard. John, I see is also on.
Yeah, I'd love to give a similar thank you to MIFS for the help on the project. The collaboration was really helpful. You know, all the great folks I met, you know, unfortunately didn't get to meet as much as we would like to during the pandemic, but who were willing to let a stranger onto their property and take samples and just, you know, just a lot of great people. And I think you're really fortunate to have a cool organization like this and information like this, like Abby mentioned. It's just that type of camaraderie, accessibility is really what makes agriculture special. So just appreciate all of you. And, you know, my information was there. If anybody has questions, just don't hesitate to contact me, and be happy to chat about any aspect as we move forward.
Abby, any parting words?
Again, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to share what we've done in our projects. And yeah, it's always exciting to see what everybody else has done and what the resources available. I'll always learn stuff no matter what I participate in. Thank you again.
Thank you. And I'd just like to also just acknowledge the whole committee that put this this conference on. It takes a village, and we definitely had a village to do that. So there's a lot of people that you're going to hear about later in the week. And so encourage you all to continue to attend. And if you're not tired of listening to me, you can attend the session at 6 p.m. and learn more about grant writing and those types of things. And I see that Jen has come on. I don't know if you have something you want to add, Jen?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo thanks for everybody for joining us today. Your presentations were amazing and you had great discussion. I also wanted to take a moment to congratulate Dean Boss on his retirement on May 1st. He has been a long-standing champion and pillar of the Family Farms Conference planning team for well over a decade. And his contributions to sustainable agriculture research and education in Michigan and nationally have just been phenomenal. So thank you, Dean, for all of your work and your guidance. We love you and we're going to miss you, but we're not going to let you go that far away.
Thank
you. Everybody take care. Have a good day. We'll see you back at 6 p.m.